So we've gone through and talked in terms of Lent through the first 5 weeks. As we were just talking a little bit off camera, the fifth week has sort of a special character with some extra services, which are one big push. When we then get to the fifth Sunday, right, which is St. Mary of Egypt, which we talked about in the last calendar section when we were talking about Lent. But then the week following St. Mary of Egypt, which is properly speaking the last week of Lent, of the Great and Holy Fast, takes on a little bit of a different character. The structure of the services are the same. And there's still this repentant structure of the services, right? All of the weekday services are Lenten in character. You have the Old Testament readings at Vespers. You have Great Compline in the evenings, pre-sanctified liturgy. But what's a little different, and back up, the Sunday of St. Mary of Egypt, it used to be that the gospel reading was the rich man and Lazarus. And I think I mentioned this when we talked about it. And so there's actually references to the rich man and Lazarus throughout the week that follows. And what's funny about it is that everybody gets confused, and sometimes you'll even hear folk explanations that say Lazarus in the parable of the rich man and Lazarus is Lazarus the brother of Martha and Mary. That's not true. Right? That's not the case. And that's not why it's there. It's there because that used to be the gospel reading that they read. Now, it sort of works in that you hear the name Lazarus a whole lot that week, but it really has nothing to do exactly. It's not tied historically to the celebration of Lazarus Saturday. But what happens is that this week, we're beginning now a chronological countdown towards the raising of Lazarus, okay, that shows up in each of the services. And I think it's actually really, really cool. So Monday, these are primarily in the Kathisma Hymns and Orthros. On Monday, as we set out upon the 6th week of the fast, let us sing to Christ a hymn in preparation for the Feast of Palms. He comes for our sake seated on the foal of an ass, that as king he may subdue the wild and unruly nations to his Father. Let us all make ready for him branches of virtues, that with rejoicing we may see his resurrection. Then Tuesday, yesterday and today Lazarus is sick, and his sisters make it known to Christ. Prepare thyself with joy, O Bethany, to welcome as thy guest the Lord and King, and to cry aloud with us, O Lord, glory to thee. And Wednesday, today dead Lazarus is buried, and his sisters sing in lamentation. But thou in thy divine foreknowledge hast predicted that what should come to pass. Lazarus sleeps, thou hast prophesied to thy disciples, but I go to raise up him whom I created. Therefore we all cry out to thee, glory to thy mighty power. And Thursday, see, it's like every day telling you what's happened, right? Thursday, Lazarus has been dead now for 2 days, and his sisters Martha and Mary shed tears of grief for him, gazing at the stone before his tomb. But the Creator has come with his disciples to despoil death and bestow life. Therefore let us cry to him, O Lord, glory to thee. Then Friday, 2 of the disciples are sent today to bring the foal of an ass to the Master of all. He who is borne on high by the hosts of the seraphim comes riding on a colt, and all-devouring death, the ruler of this world, begins to be afraid. For through Lazarus, first of all, he is despoiled of mankind. I love that imagery in the last one, right? Death and hell are starting to get nervous because they feel that Lazarus is about to be ripped from them, and they don't know what to make of it. And they're starting to tremble that just maybe they're going to be defeated, right? It's this beautiful, vivid imagery. So this is building all week, right? This is building all week. And if you can, next week already, try to read some of these. Go into the DCS app or the DCS website each morning. Read some of these hymns from Orthros and allow it to start pulling you towards Pascha. Feel that gravitational pull that it's being pulled. In the same way that death should start to tremble, right? We start to rejoice. Our heart starts to stir, and we should feel the power of these holy days pulling us in, right? So On Friday of the week of Palms, then, we have this final Theotokion, final hymn, really, of Lent. Now that we have finished the 40-day fast of Lent, let us cry out. We salute you, O city of Bethany. Rejoice, O hometown of Lazarus. Rejoice, Martha and Mary, his sisters. Tomorrow Christ will come, and by his word will revive your brother who has died. At the sound of the Lord's voice, Hades, bitter and insatiable, will shudder in fear, and it will heave a great sigh, and it will release Lazarus still bound with bandages. The Hebrew crowds will be amazed by the miracle, and they will go out to meet Jesus with palms and branches, and children whose elders envy him will see him and sing his praises. Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord, even the King of Israel. Right? Having completed now the 40 days, we go forward into the joy of Christ's triumphant entry into Jerusalem. If you can make it, I think both St. Innocent in Pleasanton and Ascension in Oakland will have pre-sanctified liturgy that morning so that you can come and sing this hymn along with the church. It's an incredible capstone to our Lenten efforts. So that evening, there is a beautiful canon appointed in honor of the raising of Lazarus, which is appointed to be sung in small Compline. One of the hymns, for example, asks, "Who has ever known or heard of a man raised from the dead when his corpse already stank? Elijah and Elisha raised the dead, yet not from the tomb or 4 days after death." Right? This is something new, and it's this foretaste of the resurrection that's happening here. This canon is also in DCS if you don't have the books, right? If you can, that night, either before or after you come for our palm folding and our cleanup around the church, read at least some of this canon. It is, there's no greater preparation for Lazarus Saturday and Holy Week. Any questions then on this last week of Lent and what we're seeing happen here? Can you see how there's a change, there's a shift, right? As soon as the Sunday of St. Mary of Egypt ends, there's sort of this shift. Our eyes are being turned a little bit more outside of us and a little bit more towards the holy days of Pascha, right? If up until now in Lent, it's been especially focused inward towards our own purification, our own repentance, our own stripping away of ourselves, now that this week is come, we're starting to now kind of shift this way, shift upwards, right, with our eyes. It kills me that there's an old thing that you hear sometimes. They called this week Quiet Week because there were parishes where the priests would cancel the services as a way to prepare and get some rest before Holy Week. I mean, okay, I get it, but I don't actually at all. I don't get it at all. This is an incredible week. This shift that's taking place, and it really is a powerful, and if anything, it helps us gain momentum into Holy Week, right? Rather than starting from nothing. So that leads us then to Lazarus Saturday. So as I think I've described before, just to reiterate, Lent ends the Friday of the 6th week. We're no longer in Lent anymore. Lazarus Saturday and Palm Sunday sort of form their own festal unit, and then we begin Holy Week. And Holy Week is separate and apart from Lent. And it's not, right, it's not part of the 40 days. If you're really being accurate, it's really like 49 days that we're fasting, right? Which notice is less than we celebrate with Pascha Pentecost, 50 days. We fast just one less, right? We rejoice more. Right? So Saturday, Lazarus Saturday then, is resurrectional in character. You'll hear all of the normal, you'll see like the priest is, the altar boys are carrying the cross, resurrection side, the deacon's carrying the gospel with the resurrection side. The priest and the deacon are saying, and we're saying in Orthros, some of the typical things that you hear on a Sunday. Let us who beheld the resurrection of Christ worship Holy Lord Jesus, the only sinless one, right? We're going to sing the Eulogitaria of the resurrection at Orthros. which are normally only sung on Sundays, right? But it's going to be sung on Saturday. It's resurrectional in character as a foreshadowing. Lazarus' resurrection is a foreshadowing of Christ's resurrection, and so it takes on this resurrectional character. We sing as many as have been baptized into Christ, right? And we see that actually reflected in the Apologion, in the hymn of that day. To confirm the general resurrection before your passion, you resurrected Lazarus from the dead, O Christ our God, right? So to confirm that your resurrection would result in the resurrection of all people, you actually raised somebody else first before you, right? Therefore, imitating the children carrying the symbols of victory, we cry out to you, the victor over death. Hosanna in the highest, blessed are you, the one who comes in the name of the Lord. This hymn will be repeated again on Palm Sunday. Because the thing that I think is easy to miss, why did Palm Sunday happen? Because word of him raising Lazarus had reached Jerusalem, right? It's this great miracle, and people are praising him and everything else. Now, it's also why some of the leaders in Jerusalem wanted to kill him already, right? They're already trying to put him and Lazarus to death. But the reason for Palm Sunday is the raising of Lazarus. And it can get lost because in the West, they tend not to celebrate the resurrection of Lazarus in that way. Go straight into Palm Sunday, and that link gets a little bit missed. Here, it's very intentional, right? The hymn for Lazarus Saturday is already talking about the branches and palms and shouts of Hosanna tomorrow, and then we repeat the hymn again on Palm Sunday. Making some sense? It's also a beautiful hymn, by the way, coming out of the Arabic tradition called "Rejoice, O Bethany," which is it's a like spiritual folk song almost. It's a quasi liturgical hymn. It's not really appointed for the church, but you can find it online, and it's a very, very pretty hymn. Sometimes we'll sing it during communion here if there's enough of an Arab persuasion who like it and can sing it. It's a very beautiful hymn. So that then leads to Palm Sunday. Now here's the reversal already that's happening. Things get reversed and all kind of funky in a good way during Holy Week. Lazarus Saturday was resurrectional in character, right? Palm Sunday is not. You won't hear resurrectional hymns on Palm Sunday. You won't hear the Evocatori of the resurrection, even though it's a Sunday. Properly speaking, you don't carry the cross or the gospel resurrectional side out. A lot of priests get that wrong, and it's not something I fight over. But properly speaking, the crucifixion side goes out on Palm Sunday, right? He's going towards his passion. Anyway, it's this funny thing, right? Saturday's resurrectional and Sunday is not, right? It's already kind of going that way. So this is one of the 12 great feasts, and this is why fish is then eaten on that day, because it does have a celebratory nature, despite not being resurrectional. And it's also a way to get a little bit of strength before Holy Week, right? Properly speaking, I think we've talked about this a little bit in the past. If you were following the true, strict monastic typikon, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday of Holy Week, you would have one meal after 9th hour, 3 p.m. That would be your only meal those days. On Thursday, you have one celebratory meal after the Divine Liturgy, where during that one meal, a little bit of wine and oil is allowed. And then you get a second meal that's a light, small, dry meal just before the 12 Gospel service. Holy Friday, and that's actually the last food you eat, really, till Pascha, with one little exception. So then Holy Friday, you would eat and drink nothing. Holy Saturday, you would eat and drink nothing until the Divine Liturgy. After the liturgy, the priest would bless artos, fasting artos, dried fruit and nuts, basically, and a little bit of wine and water, no oil. It's the only Saturday in the year where no oil is allowed. You eat a little bit of that in the church, and that holds you over until Pascha, right? a lot of us don't necessarily follow it that strictly, right, in the world. But now you understand a little bit more why Palm Sunday, they really eat your fish, friends, right? Eat your oil, drink your wine, get a little bit of strength, and get ready. So the other main hymn for Palm Sunday, we were buried with you through baptism, O Christ our God, and thus by your resurrection we have been granted immortal life. In extolling you, we cry aloud, Hosanna in the highest. Blessed are you, the one who comes in the name of the Lord. So even on a day that isn't technically resurrectional in nature, the resurrection finds its way in. We can't help ourselves, right? It's still there. So, Holy and Great Week. On Holy Monday through Holy Wednesday, the Orthros service is generally served the evening before, right? Properly, it's appointed for midnight or 1 a.m. But generally, most of us aren't awake at that time of night, and so we do it the night before, the evening before. Those are known as the bridegroom services, the Nymphios service, due to two characteristic hymns that are repeated at the Orthros service and which emphasize their watchfulness. Behold, the bridegroom is coming in the middle of the night, and blessed is the servant he shall find awake and watching. By the way, you can see this takes on a slightly different character when you're singing it at midnight or 1 a.m., right? Unworthy is the other he shall find being lazy. So beware, O soul of mine, be not overcome by sleep, so that you not be handed over to death and be shut out from the kingdom. Come to your senses and cry aloud, Holy, holy, holy are you our God. Through the Theotokos have mercy on us. And then the other, the Exapostolarion. O my Savior, now I see your wedding hall decorated, and I have not the garment needed for me to enter it. Make this raiment of my soul brightly shine, O giver of light, and save me. So why, though, properly speaking, we call this the bridegroom icon, but actually the older name for it is the phrase that Pilate utters. Behold the man, ecce homo, right? Ide o anthropos, right? Notice he doesn't say anir, he says anthropos. Behold the human being, right? He's Adam. Why is the icon, though, of Christ under arrest and mocked called the bridegroom? Why is that the image of Adam? Christ has come as a mad lover to offer himself for all of creation. He is the bridegroom coming to offer himself entirely to his bride, the church. Right? There's a certain in the original sense, right? Eros, where we get the word erotic, right, is a love that leads a person out of him or herself. It's a love that goes out of the self to the other and draws and attracts the other to them, right? And it's that love that results in God creating all of creation, right? It's this divine eros. St. Maximus the Confessor talks at great lengths about this. And it is that same divine eros, that love for his bride, that draws him down from heaven to the earth and then to the cross. Right? This is that love. Right? Psalm 18 or 19, verse 4 through 6. In them he has set a tabernacle for the sun, which is like a bridegroom coming out of his chamber, and rejoices like a strong man to run its race. Its rising is from one end of heaven, and its circuit to the other end, and there is nothing hidden from its heat. So this gets picked up in the Evlogitari of the resurrection, right? Come from the vision, O you women, bearers of good tidings, and say unto Zion, receive from us the good tidings of the resurrection of Christ. Adorn thyself, exult and rejoice, O Jerusalem, for thou hast seen Christ the King come forth from the tomb like a bridegroom from the chamber. Right? It's this imagery from the Psalms that's being picked up here. And this is what is being called to in having this be the image of for Holy Week and being called the bridegroom specifically. So Holy Monday, and through Holy Thursday, the primary gospel reading takes place during the pre-sanctified liturgy appointed for each day. Ideally, you would be serving pre-sanctified liturgy each of those 3 mornings, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Thursday is not pre-sanctified liturgy; it's Vesperal Basal liturgy, right? But similarly, it has the thematic gospel reading at the Vespers. You'll notice that, right? So, for example, Holy Monday, the main theme, which you see picked up in a lot of the hymns, is the sterile fig tree, the fig tree that did not produce any fruit, and so Christ curses it on the way in and out of Jerusalem, right? Matthew 21, 18 through 43. That's read at pre-sanctified liturgy. So if you only come to the bridegroom service, you actually see all these references. The gospel reading is something else. There is a gospel at these orthros services, but it's actually a different different gospel, right? Holy Tuesday, the theme is the wise and foolish virgins from Matthew 24, 36 through 26:2, which is where we get also all this language of, behold, the bridegroom comes in the middle of the night, right? And so on, is from that. So Holy Wednesday, the theme then is the woman who repented and washed Jesus' feet. It's sung Holy Tuesday night, right, by anticipation. Unfortunately, you sometimes get people saying, oh, Holy Tuesday is the celebration of the repentant woman. No, it's Holy Wednesday, right? It carries over. One small, tiny pet peeve. The great hymn referencing this is called the Hymn of Cassiani, right? That is not the name of the repentant woman. Saint Cassiani was a princess turned nun who is the greatest medieval female poet and hymnographer, right? Which was an amazing thing because women weren't allowed to do that back then. To the point where they actually, in some of the hymns, in order to preserve them, changed her name to an anonymous male monk so that people wouldn't delete what the woman wrote from the books, right? Unfortunately. So just to be clear, Saint Cassiani is amazing. You should read about her. She is a medieval Byzantine princess turned nun hymnographer. She is not the repentant prostitute, just to be clear. That said, right? I know, by the way, I say this because people who are named Cassiani, it is not uncommon that Holy Tuesday night, people go up to them and say, Chronio Pala, blessed feast day. Right? It's not the feast of St. Cassiani. Anyway, that and she wrote other very famous hymns, right? What is that? The great Doxastikon of Christmas, for example, was written by her. We have many of her hymns, but this is a particularly incredible one. Lord, when the woman who had fallen into many sins perceived your divinity, she assumed the role of a myrrh-bearing woman, and lamenting, brought fragrant oils to anoint you before your burial. Woe is me, she says. Night for me is a frenzy without restraint, very dark and moonless, a sinful love affair. Accept the fountains of my tears, you who draw out from the clouds the water of the sea. Take pity on me and incline to the sighing of my heart. You who bowed the heavens by your ineffable self-emptying, I shall cover your unstained feet with kisses and wipe them dry again with the locks of my hair. Those feet whose sound at twilight in paradise echoed in Eve's ears, and she hid in fear. Who can reckon the multitude of my sins or fathom the depths of your judgments, O my sin-saving Savior, my life-saving Savior? Do not despise me, your servant, since without measure is your mercy. It's an incredible, both the poetry of it, but also the exegesis, right? The unfolding of the scripture that is taking place here. Think about that the feet she's kissing are the feet that you heard in paradise. Right? And if she had just done what this woman had done, what a difference it would have been. Right? This is why Christ says she has done something great and will be remembered for all of history. Right? Incidentally, it's not uncommon in big cities in Orthodox countries that on this night when this hymn is sung, you will get many workers of this persuasion coming to the church in the cities and other areas who normally would be too ashamed to ever come to church. They feel the freedom on this night to come. And the settings for this, by the way, I think the longest I've ever heard was 22 minutes. Not in a church service. It was at a concert. You can get some pretty long settings of this hymn that are beautiful. Capella Romana, by the way, has an entire album, Hymns of Kassiani, which not only has multiple settings of this hymn, but also many of the other most famous hymns that she wrote. So, yeah. Yes. It's gorgeous. It's stunning. It's beautiful. And if you're clergy in the middle of Holy Week, you're like, this is awesome, but can we just sort of pick up the pace a little bit, please? I mean, I sort of just. It is beautiful. Yeah. Yes, I don't remember how did it work? Yes, there's there's a story there that I don't remember about her writing it. And if I remember right, it's the emperor who had wanted to marry her, and she left him behind for the convent. I don't remember the. Do you remember the story or? Yeah. Right. 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 Oh, that's right. That's right. 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 Oh, okay. Yes. 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 That's right. That's right. It's probably the one right. I think it was those feet who sound at twilight in paradise echoing as she hid in fear, I think is the line maybe. Right. Right, right. The medieval romances, they knew what they were doing. Yeah, that's very true. Um, I don't know. I don't know. I'd have to look into it, but I like it. I remember that when my wife hides from me that it's romantic. Anyway. Anyway. Um, so it's not uncommon on Holy Wednesday that we celebrate the Holy Mystery of Unction. That's not, properly speaking, a part of Holy Week. Okay. Um, it's not actually appointed anywhere in the Triodion that a Holy Unction be celebrated that day. Not that I'm not suggesting it's a bad thing that we do it, but just to be clear, it's completely outside the order of Lenten services, right? The reason it's there, so it first got there at a time when most priests in the villages did not have a blessing to hear confessions, right? And in fact, some parishes, they didn't even have priests. They would have sort of traveling priests, right? And even recently, right? The vice chair of our metropolis council, Siros Garofilaikis, when he grew up in Evia, his village church didn't have an assigned priest. They had one of the monks from Osios David Monastery come and serve liturgy at the services there. In his case, it happened to be St. Yakovos. and so he got to be his altar boy, actually. But especially under the Turks, there were a lot of villages that either didn't have a priest, or if they had a priest, it was a simple priest who was probably the son or the grandson of the last priest or the nephew, who had no real theological education. His predecessor would teach him how to do the services, but the bishop would not give him a blessing to preach or to hear confessions because he was completely uneducated. Sometimes they couldn't even read. They would just learn services from ear by memory and perform the services. So what would happen is that on Holy Week, in those situations especially, the priest would serve unction as a way of granting some measure of remission of sins and healing of soul before Pascha, even though he couldn't hear their confessions necessarily. Especially if, usually there was like a traveling confessor. Maybe he got to the village, but it was like the first week of Lent, and another month has gone by, and there's no chance to, confess again. So anyway, they would celebrate unction as one final thing. Now it stuck even down into the present and spread because it was seen as a good thing to do, this final spiritual healing before receiving communion on Holy Thursday and Pascha. It's actually really for Holy Thursday's communion, not really per se Pascha. That's why it's Wednesday, not some other day that week, right? Also, I should say in the morning on Holy Thursday is the final pre-sanctified liturgy, right? It's the final pre-sanctified liturgy. It's also the last time that you say the prayer of Saint Ephrem. Is right before that pre-sanctified liturgy. It's the last time you say the prayer of Saint Ephrem. In some places, like in the Slavic tradition, it's not uncommon that they don't do unction on Wednesday itself, and instead they'll do unction at some other time regionally during Lent, where all of the priests in the area will gather together, because properly unction should have 7 priests serving it. We'll get to this later on in the classes, but properly you have 7 priests to do unction. So what they'll do is that they'll gather regionally throughout Lent and have unction some other time, right? Anyway, it is, I should say, one of the unfortunate things that happens though is because unction is so popular, and understandably, I mean, it is one of the holy mysteries, right? It's a sacrament. It's an important thing. But it ends up bumping the Orthros for Holy Thursday, which is unfortunate. And His Eminence does not like that. In fact, he and I are traveling to a parish this Holy Wednesday, where normally they just do unction Wednesday night like we do here. And he had Bishop Ioannis as the chancellor and myself call ahead and say, no, you're going to change your schedule. You're doing unction at 3:30 and we're doing Orthros at 6:30. And parish was kind of like, okay. But His Eminence really does not like when unction trumps that Orthros. Anyway, and the fact is that the Orthros, usually served Holy Wednesday evening, includes this beautiful canon reflecting on Judas's betrayal, the Last Supper, and the Holy Eucharist as a way of preparing for receiving communion on Holy Thursday. Then in the morning of Holy Thursday, we celebrate the Vesperal Divine Liturgy of St. Basil, commemorating the institution of the Eucharist. And one of the primary features you see there is that the cherubic hymn, the communion hymn, and the hymn after communion are all replaced with this characteristic Holy Thursday hymn. Receive me today, O Son of God, as a partaker of your mystical supper. I will not reveal your mystery to your enemies, nor will I give you a kiss as to Judas. But like the robber, I confess to you, remember me, O Lord, when you come into your kingdom. Right? When we say that and sing that in any other liturgy or as part of our prayers before communion, we're actually praying the cherubic hymn from Holy Thursday. Right? So then, Great and Holy Friday, in the Orthros, which is served the evening of Holy Thursday, we read the gospel accounts of Christ's passion and death from all 4 gospels in 12 sections, right? This is the 12 gospel service. During the 15th antiphon of this service, the cross is processed through the church and planted in the middle for our veneration. It always saddens me how many people come to Pascha and don't come to the 12 gospel service. It's one of the least attended services of the week, and it's really unfortunate. And yet, isn't it sort of a pause for all of us to reflect? In our lives, we want the resurrection, but not the cross, right? obviously, it's an incredible service. This is one of the services that got me, right? My reason for becoming Orthodox. This was the service that really, really woke me up, right? So then we continue into Great and Holy Friday. It's the strictest fast day of the year. In the morning, we have the holy or royal hours, in which we stand watch at the cross. And in the afternoon, we celebrate the Vespers of the Unnailing, in which Christ's body is taken down from the cross, and the epitaphios is placed in the funeral bier, the kavouklon. Just one small little nitpick. The kavouklon is not the tomb of Christ. It's the funeral bier, right? It's the thing on which the body is carried. It isn't the tomb. What's the tomb? The altar. The altar table, right? Which is why every time that the deacon censes the altar table before Divine Liturgy, he prays the hymn of the tomb, right? In the grave with the body, or in the tomb with the body, with the soul in Hades as God, in paradise with the thief, were you at all times, O Christ, enthroned with the Father and the Holy Spirit as one uncircumscribed, right? The altar is the tomb, not technically the kavouklon. Anyway, that imagery gets mixed in a lot of pop piety. Technically, that afternoon, actually, after the Vespers, before the Orthros that night, there is small compline appointed, and there's an incredibly beautiful and moving canon in the Triodion in honor of the crucifixion and burial of Christ. That is really, really beautiful. And actually, throughout Holy Week, there's small canons appointed at Compline each night, or each afternoon, really, is what it turns into. You know, if somehow in the midst of your work and everything else that you have, you still have time to pray in the middle of the afternoon, they're very beautiful. So then Holy Saturday, this is the only Saturday of the entire year for which Divine Liturgy is not appointed. Okay. So you're going to ask, well, wait a minute, isn't there the Vesperal Basal Liturgy? Yes, but when is that taking place? After Vespers. It's the next liturgical day. Right? There is no Holy Saturday morning liturgy appointed. The evening before, notice, for example, right, normally there's Vesperal Basal Liturgy on the eve of Christmas or Theophany, right? What happens when Theophany or Christmas is on a Sunday the day before? No Vesperal Liturgy. It becomes a regular morning liturgy because it's Saturday. Right? Holy Saturday is entirely unique in this regard. The evening before, the Orthros is served, in which we sing the Lamentations, which originally were interspersed with the verses of Psalm 118, and we commemorate Christ's defeat of Hades. It's sort of both a funeral and a defeat of Hades, right? In practice, the placing of the Lamentations later in the service obscures the emphasis of the service. So if you're familiar about the way that we normally serve it in Greek churches, by and large today, right? We celebrate the Lamentations late in the service, right? Those are the hymns that we, every generation, right? We're singing that after the canon, late in the service. Well, what are those Lamentations, right? Those are the funeral hymns, interspersed with Psalm 118. Does anyone remember when we talked about Orthros, where does Psalm 118 fall on a Saturday Orthros? It's at the beginning, or towards the beginning, before the Gospel, right after the Apolytikia, right? It's back at the first part of the Orthros. The canon appointed for that day, which Petros loves to get us all singing, right? O God, our deliverer, right? Lithrota, Theos of Logitosi. We love it, right? What is that canon celebrating? The defeat of Hades. Which happens first? Christ being buried or the defeat of Hades? He's buried, and then he defeats Hades, right? The Orthros structure, properly speaking, reflects that. You do the Lamentations at the beginning of the service, celebrating his burial, right? Then later in the service, we sing the canon celebrating his defeat of Hades. And then at the very end, we process the epitaphios then around the church or around the property or something, right? Or through the streets, colliding with the other parishes if you're in Greece, right? um, uh, for whatever reason, I suspect, frankly, because everybody gets there late, that's my snarky, maybe too cynical expectation as to what's going on. The Lamentations, which are everybody's favorite because they're syrupy sweet, all got moved to late in the service, but it ends up actually obscuring what the service is commemorating and the chronology of what Christ is doing, right? And this is where, if you ask me, right, economia goes too far. We become practical and we end up actually sacrificing the whole point and the whole meaning of what we're doing for the sake of convenience or practicality. That said, don't go condemning people. Come to the service and sing. At the end of the service, then we have a reading from the Old Testament and from the Epistle and from the Gospel. The Epistle, I mean, the Old Testament reading is, of course, Ezekiel's prophecy of the dry bones that receive flesh and spirit and come back to life. I love that reading. On the few occasions where I've had the opportunity to read it, I've never gotten through. I remember Tasso Nicolaides, who was our chanter here for years. Every year he wanted to chant it, and he would say to the rest of us at the chant stand, please, this year can I read it, because I might not be here next year, and this might be my last year. It's such Greek guilt, right? And like you're like, okay, fine, Tasso, read it. And sure enough, he'd get 2 words into it, and he would just start choking out. It was so beautiful to see. The Russians will actually chant this prophecy in a very unique tone. There's a recording of this one OCA priest who, if I'm not mistaken, used to be a professional singer, but he set this in a particular way that is so haunting and beautiful, and I love his version of it. I can never, in my wildest dreams, do it. It's just gorgeous. And then the gospel account sort of ends on a cliffhanger, right? It ends with Pilate saying, go and post a guard, right? They say, we've heard his disciples talking, and we think they're going to come and steal his body and say that he rose. And Pilate says, then go post a guard. And the gospel ends, right? The church knows what it's doing. It's building the tension, right, and telling the story. Finally, Holy Saturday in the morning or early afternoon, properly speaking, we have the Vesperal Divine Liturgy of St. Basil. Historically, this is when all of the catechumens were baptized, right? There's actually 15 Old Testament readings appointed for that day. We only do 3, really. We do, what do we end up reading? Genesis, and then Job, and then Daniel. But properly speaking, there's 15 Old Testament readings appointed, which they're reading while you're baptizing the catechumens, right? So while you're baptizing everybody, the people in the rest of the church are reading the Old Testament readings. And then instead of the normal Alleluia before the gospel, we of course have the responsorial psalm, Arise, O God, judge the earth, for you shall inherit all the Gentiles or the nations. Nations is really more helpful. Obviously, just one of the coolest, right? One of the most fun parts. You ask every priest, and it's basically that and spraying everyone with holy water on Theophany are like their 2 favorite things. Right, and it's this incredible, triumphant. In fact, in the older practices that you'll still see in some Slavic traditions, they actually wear purple or dark vestments throughout the entirety of Lent, even on Sundays. And it's at this moment they change to white, right? It's at this moment that they change. So in the same way, like at Forgiveness Vespers, right, we hit the great Prokeimenon and everybody changes from white to dark. They'll stay dark for all of Lent. And it's at this very moment that they finally switch to white. And so he comes bursting out of the altar, throwing the bay leaves and the flowers, dressed in white for the first time. And it's just awesome, right? On this day as well, the cherubic hymn gets replaced. So we don't sing the normal cherubic hymn. And instead, we sing the cherubic hymn from the Divine Liturgy of St. James, the Jerusalem cherubic hymn this day. Right? It's sort of fitting that we're singing the hymn from Jerusalem on this day, isn't it? Let all mortal flesh keep silent and stand in fear and trembling, giving no thought to things of the earth. For the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords is coming forth to be sacrificed and given as food to the faithful. Before him go the choir of angels with all the principalities and powers, the many-eyed cherubim and the six-winged seraphim, covering their faces and chanting their hymn, Alleluia. It's I love that cherubic hymn. It's so beautiful. And so like the church, I'm going to end on a cliffhanger right there. Any questions or thoughts? I haven't done it justice, but at least it's an overview. Yeah. Yeah. Hell's afraid. Let him tremble. Let him make a racket. I love it, actually. I do love it. Every now and then, like, it's so... The Metropolitan and I were at a parish last year, and it was kind of quiet because we're all white bread and it's in the suburbs and whatever, and everybody's polite. And this moment happens, and he comes bursting through and starts, and he kind of just pauses and he looks and goes on one of the pews, trying to get everybody to come on, wake up, right? Celebrate a little, make some noise. So, well, so I won't be here that morning. I won't be here till later in the day. So I think it's great. Go for it. I have no blessings to give, but you have it anyway. I'm all for make that moment, right? By the way, technically speaking, you know how there's the Paschal homily of St. John Chrysostom appointed for Pascha night? There's also actually a patristic homily from St. Epiphanios that is appointed for Holy Saturday, usually read, properly speaking, at the end of the lamentation service as people are venerating. If you've never read St. Epiphanios' homily for Holy Saturday, do it. One of the parts that always gets me, by the way, every priest I know who reads it to his parish as they're venerating the Epitafios, they all end up just sobbing. It's so amazing. But there's this moment where it's describing Christ walking up to the gates of hell. And with a simple word, the gates fall down. And it says at that moment, the legions of angels that Christ told Pilate he could call down if he wanted to are called down and go rushing into Hades and binding every demon there and freeing every human soul. The angels go in front of him, searching out every human soul that they can find and bringing them out. The imagery of it is beyond majestic. Please read the homily of St. Epiphanios for Holy Saturday. It is incredible, right? Just that imagery that those weren't empty words. He knew what he was about to do. And when he invoked a reference to the legions of angels, he knew what he was about to do with those angels, right? And the fact that he, in his kingly glory, doesn't have to say or do really anything. The doors fall down and the angels go rushing in and all the human souls are freed. This is our God. This is our God. Anyway, yeah, please read it. I wish more parishes would, but I get it. Everyone's tired. Just all the people and everything else. I think that's probably a pretty good place to end. Lord of the powers, be with us, for in times of distress we have no other help but you, Lord of the powers, have mercy on us.